If mental gymnastics was an Olympic sport, consumers of the mainstream media would win the gold every time. Most people who consume mainstream media seem to have a grasp of the toxicity of the entertainment industry, but when it comes to systemic racism, it's too much of a stretch. If you haven't heard my speech on comparing instances of retconning and erasure, you might not find my voice to have an authority on the subject. I can assure you that, both in preparation for this speech as well as previous speeches and research papers, I've gathered enough evidence to provide you with an objective standpoint on the issue. The issue being the initial erasing of characters' ethnicities and the entertainment industry's continued silence on the matter. Today I will be using what seems to be the most contested example from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Elizabeth Olsen's portrayal of Wanda Maximoff. I will be providing you with a refresher on retconning and erasure, referencing the long history of systemic racism that the Jewish and Romani people have endured, and telling you why addressing the system or industry in general is more effective than individual scrutiny. It's important to recognize that the forms of the media who have multi-pronged stories have the ability to use retconning as the guise for erasure. Retconning itself is the making of changes from the source material to better suit the broader story. While retconning can be inherently good, it can still be used as a veil for the act of erasure. Some changes made to characters are easier to hide because the audience who's receiving the short end of the stick in the sense of representation doesn't have a strong enough voice to bring attention to the problem. Conversely, the problem deals with the fact that the audience who does not experience this injustice or is unaffected by this problem remains unfazed. Erasure deals with the identifiable characteristics that mimic what we know as protected statuses. This ranges from things like race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, or other characteristics that provide the audience with the relatability factor. Some commonly referenced examples from the MCU deal with the sexualities of characters never being referenced unless it's explicitly straight. When there is so much source material readily available to Marvel, substituting meaningful queer relationships with subpar straight ones is inexcusable. But before I lose sight, the issue of the matter deals with the long history of systemic racism that the Jewish and Romani people have endured. In the words of Brian Foster, an EWS professor at Cal Poly Pomona, it is very likely that the Jewish people are the most widely persecuted ethnic group in world history. Marginalization of this group is so second nature, a slur against these people has been normalized by pop culture. Bam Bauer, a representative of the Holocaust Center, states that the word, in the context of the Jewish and Romani people, is considered by many as a derogatory term. An example in the modern media where this word was used is the titular use of the word in Shakira's song by the same name. In the song, Shakira's allusions contribute to harmful stereotypes as well as the typical sexualization of these people. The importance of the issue is that it has offensive roots. While Shakira may not have meant it to be specifically derogatory, the connotation of the word is still at the expense of the Romani people. The other instance is where Elizabeth Olsen in an interview describes her character as being in Eastern Europe. Because this was in the early stages of Wanda's development in the MCU, Elizabeth Olsen may very well have been repeating what the writers wanted for that character. Even if the description is how Olsen saw the character, she very clearly uses that word and vagabond interchangeably. Even so, the use of this word is still problematic. The Jewish and Romani people have been marginalized in ways like this and worse for centuries. My goal for this point is to put into your mind the connotation that the word has the next time you go to use it. The problem, however, isn't solved by attacking a single person, as it provides them an out to make a statement and sweep the larger issue under the rug. According to the Opposing Views online collection, taking an anti-racist stance on something means that you have to regard it as a systemic issue. This isn't to say you should just ignore individual instances of racism, but by individually scrutinizing people for the prejudice that takes place, it allows the individual to save face while simultaneously fostering the same problematic environment. It delves into the concept of performative activism. By the definition of the Boston Medical Center, people only address issues to increase their own success and gain support within the system, but won't actually address the issue in a way that will have a lasting impact. When it comes to Olson's portrayal of Wanda Maximoff, the situation as a whole is a great example when it comes to understanding erasure as a problem relating to systemic racism. Elizabeth Olsen's white. The version of Wanda that she plays doesn't seem to have any Jewish or Romani ties at all. Many argue that Wanda in a lot of her original iterations was not Romani, despite a majority of her comic runs dealing with having ties to her roots. The other issue lies in the environment Wanda operates in. Initially, she and her brother are part of the scientific experimentation sector of Hydra. The implication of a character who was once Jewish going for an organization who originated from the Nazis is a diametric opposition for her intended character. In addition, motivations for her character play into the stereotyping of Romani women. Among considerations for her character, the problem is with Marvel Studios and the entertainment industry as a whole for trivializing the existence of Jewish and Romani people. In closing, the issue of systemic racism in the form of erasure is a more complex issue to address than people initially think. As discussed, erasure can be used in stories with source material. Erasure can be used for stories with source material under the guise of retconning. One such group to look at when understanding erasure in this way is the Jewish and Romani people. Wanda Maximoff being the example from the MCU, what takes place is the trivialization and outright erasure of an identity that was important to her character according to the source material. You have to remember that Marvel and other big corporations are at fault for the injustices done to these characters. So the next time you or a friend uses certain words or praises certain people for addressing an issue via individual scrutinization, remember to face the problem looking at the broader system, not just the person.